had no lictors. There was no line of clients at his door, just the faint sound of a dripping eave and the quiet rustle of his companion shifting under the covers. The house smelled faintly of wine and damp straw. Claudius had long since stopped hoping for a summons. To Rome, to Capri, to anywhere. What use had anyone for a limping and stammering scholar whose former brother-in-law had tried to overthrow the emperor? Though he had swiftly divorced Aelia, Sejanus's sister, following the prefect's fall, suspicion clung to him all the same. Still, being asked to leave the city by Tiberius, having since lived a low life with a prostitute, spending his free time gambling and drinking, was better than execution, the fate that still continued to befall the supporters of Sejanus. But all things considered, Claudius wasn't unhappy. His house was modest, and his funds were limited, but he was free to do as he pleased, unburdened by any concern for political optics. And Lide, the prostitute he had lived with for the past 6 years, treated him well. She saw no other men while they were together, and she kept things in order, small as their home was. His 6-year-old daughter, Claudia Antonia, he had left in Rome, given over to the care of his mother Antonia, who, after the loss of so many grandchildren, needed a child to nurture. And though many in Claudius's circle casually referred to Lide as his wife, all knew she was a prostitute, a situation that might one day taint the future prospects of his young daughter. For that reason alone, she was better off living with her grandmother. As Claudius rolled out of bed, careful not to disturb Lide, a knock came at the door. Before he could drag his lame leg across the room, Antonius Felix, his freedman, dashed past him and flung it open. Standing outside was a soldier, scroll in hand. "Tiberius is dead," the soldier said flatly, holding out the parchment. Claudius didn't speak. He simply nodded. This news was not unexpected. He accepted the scroll from Felix and unfurled it. "Caligula has been hailed as Caesar," he murmured, "and I am summoned to Rome." Then a chill swept through him. Like many, Claudius had hoped that Tiberius would live long enough for Gemellus to reach the age of majority. He was an earnest boy, willing to be guided by his elders. But Caligula, he was a different story. If the reports he'd heard were to be believed, Caligula had not been well regarded on the island of Capri. Tiberius had called him a viper, nursed in the bosom of Rome. Poor Tiberius, thought Claudius. His tragic life had taught him to fear everyone. Claudius could only imagine the terror that must have gripped his uncle in those final days, growing older, growing weaker, and watching as those on Capri began to court Caligula as if he were already emperor, at least within the villa. But not everyone was eager to abandon the setting sun for the rising. Marcus Cocceius Nerva, Tiberius's jurist and his longtime friend, was the first to leave. Anticipating nothing but tyranny to follow Tiberius, Nerva said his farewells to his friend, then excused himself to the privacy of his own suite of rooms, where he opened his veins in a hot bath. And he wasn't the only one. Lucius Aruntius, one of the senators caught up in the scandal surrounding the courtesan Albusilla, likewise opened his veins, freeing himself from the rule of praetorian prefects like Sejanus and now Macro. "Poor Gemellus," Tiberius was overheard saying to his grandson. "When I am dead, Caligula will kill you." After a slight pause, he added, "And then someone will kill Caligula." Upon his return to Rome, Claudius was not only reunited with his daughter Claudia and his mother Antonia, but also with a dear friend he had never expected to see again, at least not alive. Herod Agrippa, grandson to the late King Herod the Great, had once been Claudius's closest childhood friend. Raised as a royal hostage in the household of Antonia, he grew up alongside Claudius and his siblings, Germanicus and Livilla. As young men, while Germanicus led campaigns in Pannonia and Germania, Claudius and Herod, alongside Tiberius's son Castor, lived a riotous life in the city, frequenting brothels and drinking dens, gambling recklessly and kicking up their heels, a lifestyle that did not stop when Castor married Claudius's sister. However, when Castor died, Herod was quietly excluded from court, an unwelcome reminder to the grieving Tiberius of the son he had lost. With Castor gone, those who had once funded Herod's courtly lifestyle saw no further use for him. The loans they had extended, meant to purchase favour in Castor's future reign, were suddenly called due. And so Herod Agrippa left Rome. For a decade and a half, Herod stayed away, writing to Claudius from time to time about his adventurous attempts to earn the drachmae needed to satisfy his creditors. He married a cousin named Kypros, and by her had 3 children. For a time he lived under the good graces of his uncle, Herod Antipas, the Tetrarch of Galilee. But according to Herod's letters, it was really Herodias, the wife of Antipas, who convinced her husband to house him. She was the daughter of his late brother, Aristobulus, and like Herod Agrippa, a descendant of the revered Hasmonean princess, Miriamne. But her marriage to Antipas had outraged the people. Herodias had divorced her first husband to marry Antipas, a breach of their religious law. The scandal was too public, the insult too raw. Fearful that unrest might break out in Galilee, Antipas silenced the most vocal critic of their union by execution. The man was beheaded at a banquet, his head displayed on a platter, an act meant to quiet the people, but which served only to antagonize them further. With the people turned against Herod Antipas and the new governor of Syria, Lucius Vitellius, at odds with Judea's prefect Pontius Pilatus, over the many outbreaks of violence he had failed to contain, Herod Agrippa gathered up Kypros and their children and departed for Alexandria. But his reputation for owing money to nearly everyone preceded him, and in Alexandria he found little help. At last, he returned to Rome and threw himself upon the mercy of Claudius's mother. Antonia obliged, paying off his 300,000 drachmae obligation and freeing Herod Agrippa to once again show his face in Roman society. But Herod never knew when to quit. Returned to good standing, Tiberius invited him to Capri, where he was installed as tutor to his grandson, Gemellus. But Herod quickly saw that it was Caligula who was being courted on the island. And so, seeking to win favour himself, he made a show of enthusiasm for Caligula's passion for chariot racing, and, within hearing of the wrong ears, expressed a fervent hope that this current race come to an end. When the words were reported to Tiberius, he understood them all too well. Herod Agrippa was immediately imprisoned in a mean villa on the island of Capri. Once again, Claudius's mother came to his rescue. She could not secure Herod's release, but as grandmother to the next emperor, whether Caligula or Gemellus, Antonia made certain that Herod's guards treated him well, kept him fed, and supplied him with reading material and oil lamps. His imprisonment, though still confinement, was made as comfortable as possible while he awaited trial. Then Tiberius died, of a stroke, they say, and the first act of Caligula was to release Herod Agrippa from confinement and cancel the impending trial for treason. "And where is Caligula? Gaius," Claudius asked his newly released friend, catching himself just in time. His nephew had always hated the name Little Boots, and if ever there was a time to cater to him, it was now. "He'll arrive in a day or so," Herod replied. He travelled slowly, by formal procession. Claudius nodded. "Then I expect I'll have to wait until Gaius arrives," he added, "before learning why he summoned me to Rome." On March 28th, just 12 days after the death of Tiberius, Caligula's entry into the city was met with the bursting enthusiasm of crowds who had waited 15 long years to see a natural son of Germanicus and grandson of the divine Augustus proclaimed Caesar. The Praetorian Guard, who had hailed him emperor immediately following the death of Tiberius, flanked him on both sides, led by Suetonius Macro. Caligula walked proudly through the cheering masses and down into the Forum Romanum. There, positioned across from the Senate, Claudius sat with his mother and Herod Agrippa, all dressed in their finest white togas. Caligula's sisters, Agrippinilla, Drusilla, and Livilla, sat together in places of honour, each beside her own husband. Their presence formed a living tableau, part of the public spectacle. To Claudius, the pageantry resembled that of a Roman triumph, though without the prisoners of war or wagons of plunder. After first greeting his sisters, an act that drew thunderous applause from the crowd, Caligula paid homage to his grandmother Antonia, and then to Claudius. Only after this did he address the Senate, prepared to follow them into the Curia Julia, where the legal formalities of the transfer of power would take place. Claudius, having been granted the right to sit in the Senate years earlier by Tiberius, though only as an observer, took up his place and followed Rome's conscript fathers into the meeting. Inside, prayers were offered to the goddess Roma, to Jupiter the Father, and to the divine Augustus. Sacrifices were made, and the auspices taken, yielding to the delight of the senators spectacular omens. And then the meeting began. On that day, in a single piece of legislation brought forth by the Senate, Caligula, a political unknown with no military service, was granted the same powers that Augustus had accumulated over a lifetime and later entrusted to Tiberius. Caligula accepted the Senate's charge with humility. He then made a formal request that the Senate confer divine honours upon the late Tiberius, just as they had once done for Augustus. But the Senate refused. Tiberius's popularity was too precarious, not only with them, but with the Roman people, who now shouted in the streets, "To the Tiber with Tiberius!" Furthermore, the Senate nullified Tiberius's will, citing mental incapacity. He had named Caligula and Gemellus joint heirs, but Gemellus was a child, proof, they argued, that Tiberius's mind had gone. Caligula did not argue. He accepted their decision, without protest. As Rome's new emperor, officially sanctioned by the Senate, Caligula was expected to serve as consul for the upcoming term, set to begin on the 1st of July. To hold the office with him, he informed the Senate that his co-consul would be none other than his uncle, Claudius.